Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, and each week I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another and bring them on to share some of their story in hopes that it inspires you to tell some of yours. I'm thrilled this week to have my special guest, Christopher, on with me. Hey, man, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are.
Hey everybody, my name's Chris Guerrieri, and I'm a teacher in the North Houston area, and I also am a motivational speaker as well.
Awesome. Well, Chris, whenever I start these conversations, the first thing I always like to start with is back at the beginning. When you were a kid, dreaming of what you were going to be as you got older, does it align at all with what you're doing now?
I would have said yes to the teaching part, absolutely not to the motivational speaking part at all. So I'm both of my parents are teachers, so I kind of felt like education was kind of always in my blood. So I knew that was probably a route I was going to go on. But as my life kind of changed from when I was in the 20s to now I'm in my 30s, I picked up motivational speaking and realized that was just another way for me to help impact youth and impact my community. So that part I did not see coming at all.
What it's so funny you mentioned that because we speak in front of kids all day long and it's nothing. And then when you got to speak in front of adults
Right.
or larger groups, it becomes a really stressful situation for us educators. So when did you realize that was part of your passion too?
So I would say about 2 years ago, I started realizing like in my class, like it wasn't enough to just do all the content, kind of be a lot old teacher was teaching the side of things. And I wanted them to see like, I'm a person too. Yeah, I'm your teacher, but I'm also a person too who's gone through ups and downs and difficulties and struggles. And I wanted them to kind of see the humanistic side of me that sometimes we don't always have time to show because we're so busy worried about content. And my students were kind of like you're really good. Like they were like, what if you started putting stuff on YouTube so we could access it more? And I kind of started doing that. And then it kind of just kept growing to adults. And then people, it was just the easier way for me to share like my passion on just helping people out.
I feel like when I began speaking, I started to learn a lot about myself too. What do you feel like you've learned about yourself through this process?
Uh, Well, I've learned number one to be really comfortable, to be on stage. Like I really like to be like, how they say, like, are you the thermometer, or are you gonna change the
Mhm.
temperature? And I really realized like, wow, that's what I'm good at. And I think I took for granted too a lot of like what I'm able to do in my classroom is what happens in every classroom. I always just thought that was how it went. And so I
Yeah.
realized like, wow, I could really help people kind of be vulnerable with their students and be vulnerable with the kids and then also be vulnerable in their own lives.
Mhm.
Um, and then I also realized like, I kind of like the challenge of it. When you're speaking, you kind of really never know what your audience is going to be like. And, when people share their stories, they expect you to be ready for it and to give them advice and to give them like that. So I love that, like right on spot, you're able to help people and really, and I think deep down, Todd, I think a lot of people they kind of want to feel as how can I'm not going through this life thing alone, if that makes sense. For a
Yeah.
lot of people, I really feel like they just want to know, hey, I have problems, and it's nice to see that I'm not in this by myself. And
Yeah.
I think those are the really big things I took away as I started this whole journey on motivational speaking.
Well, one thing I get asked often for is advice to people who are considering going into speaking themselves. What advice do you have people who might want to get into speaking themselves?
Oh my gosh. You just gotta, it's hard at first to start, right? Because you want to be perfect at it. And I don't
Mhm.
think it's so important that you have to be perfect. You just have to keep going.
Yeah.
And the first times you post anything online or the first times you stand on stage, it may not be great, but
Mhm.
like you're always going to get better. And I think you learn things that are when I first started, I listen to a lot of motivational speakers, so I might have like thrown in like Eric Thomas or tried to be like that. And I realized like after time, like no, I have a distinct way of speaking, and it's okay for me to be comfortable with speaking as Chris Guerrieri. So
I
definitely my
think that's
advice would be
really good
get out
advice
there, get out
though,
there often.
because I think of my own journey. I think of the same thing. I wanted to emulate certain presenters that I loved, and then it had me stressing out trying to be as good as them. And I realized I just needed to be who I was and bring that because that shows a lot as well. And shifting gears a little bit, let's think
Yeah.
about you back as a kid in school. What was school like for you as a kid? Were you a good student? Did you enjoy it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was actually a really great student, but I struggled a lot with anxiety and depression.
Mhm.
And so for me, growing up, it was tough as do I like where do I fit in? Like getting good grades was never like this difficult thing for me. It just felt naturally to me, but I didn't do great with, friends and things like that. So I just focused on my schoolwork because
Mhm.
that's what everybody knew me as was the smart kid. And
Yeah.
so definitely like that's how I was as a kid. And then I kind of just grew into I've always kind of been this entertainer. Like I'm a major introvert, but I love being on center stage. And so really just getting comfortable owning that side of me.
When did you realize the depth of the anxiety or the depression and how it played in your life? When did that become really, whether you were cognizant of that?
Yeah, so I would say when I was around 16 or 17, which is, I mean, I'm a high school math teacher, so like that's kind of my shtick now is I deal with 16 and 17-year-olds. But
Mhm.
definitely around then, I started to realize like, I was really tough on myself, and there were times I really felt alone and really struggled. And I think that's like one of my major purposes in my speaking is really get across to people like you're not in this alone, and no matter
Mhm.
what you're going through. And so for me, I had to learn how to kind of cope. And I don't know if you know this or not about my story, but I actually got up to a weight of 360 pounds. Um,
Oh,
and
wow.
so yeah, when I was 24, I had a heart attack scare, and the doctor literally sat me down, looked me straight in the face, and was like, "Man, if you don't change, you're going to be dead before you're 30." And it just really put things into perspective. And so like that year I dropped 100 pounds in 11 months. And but I always tell people, because people are like, well, what's the secret to the weight loss? And it was really like it really wasn't weight loss to me. It was like I found this confidence to step out of my shell and be who I was.
Yeah. Well, you said something there though that I think I wanted to have a little bit more into. You say you found the confidence to lose that weight and to step into who you were, but I'm hard pressed to believe that that confidence was there right away. What did you do to kind of build that up to believe in yourself
Mm-hmm.
enough to change?
uh, you know, People always find this funny, but the number one question I get when I lose weight is, what did I do? And they always think like, was it surgery, or was it, what kind of pills did I take? And I always tell people like I had to really face like stuff that I hadn't dealt with in a long
Yeah.
time. And I really like kind of I know this sounds bad, but I kind of broke myself down.
Right.
Uh, uh, and I wanted to see what I was made of. And like I always that side of me when I did like school and grades and everything, but I never did it at like a fitness level or at a level where I really tested myself. And I realized like through my journey, like how much I loved running and stuff.
Mhm.
And it became a point in my journey where I would like run 8 to 10 miles a day just because I wanted to remind myself of how awesome I was at it.
Yeah.
So for anybody listening to this out there that's like, hey, I really want to find out what I'm made of. Like we all have stuff that we're running from, right? We all have stuff that
Mhm.
we're kind of scared of. But my best advice would be like, hey, if you never face it, it's always going to be on that back burner. And like for me, with my weight loss and stuff, I always put it on the back burner till I got to a point where it was like, you either take care of it now, or there's going to be no turning back. And it was just like, okay, well, let's get to this and see what I'm really made of. And I mean, it's just awesome to say like, hey, I was able to transform and do that stuff. But I know
Mhm.
everyone has their 360 pounds of whatever they want to do. So.
So how has your family been through that whole process?
Oh, so I was well. First off, I was single at the time. I'm now married, so did get to meet my wife through the whole journey and process. For my family, they were really supportive. We actually joined Weight Watchers and stuff together, and they made it easy because they knew like, I needed to make a change. But eventually, Todd, I got to be honest on some things of like. Eventually, it became my journey.
Yeah.
It changed from it being our journey to it being my journey, and the fact of like I can come to grips with like no one was going to lose the weight for me. It was completely something that I had to step in and take accountability for myself for.
Yeah.
And it gave me such self-confidence of
Yeah.
just being able to stand up and be like, hey, like I'm a unique individual person and I may not be perfect, but I should count for something.
Yeah. I love that, and it's such a powerful story and journey as well. And one of the things that I love to ask on these tell your story conversations is, and I think this will tie in well to your story, is I feel like as educators and as presenters and as people on social media, we very quickly get caught in a comparison trap where we are looking at others and wondering, why am I not there? Why don't I have that? And then the doubt begins to seep in and control our thoughts. How do you keep doubt at bay?
Uh, it is hard because there's always that comparison thing, especially like as I'm a speaker trying to get out there, they're always going to compare me to another speaker, whatever, like that. But I really think for me, I know like there's no end to the journey. And I think a lot of people view like there's this magical pinnacle end to the journey. There's really not. Like you're going to get to the top of your mountain that you're climbing and you're going to realize like you're going to want to climb another mountain,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's so important for people to embrace like steps along your journey because I'll say like I post YouTube videos all the time and I may not have a view count of what other motivational speakers have, but when one person reaches out and says, I really needed to hear that today, or I shared your message with, like, for me, like a lot of them will be like, I shared my message with my son, and it's like that's it, like that's what it's all about, is how am I able to help people in that regard, because otherwise what's my story matter.
Yeah.
And I always tell my kids, when I share my story, when I get on stage or do something, I know there's a good shot that there's someone in the audience who was just like me, like an
Mhm.
anxious, depressed 17-year-old who's
Yeah.
not really like confident to stand in their own skin. And maybe there's someone in the audience who's contemplating ending their own life. Maybe there's someone in the audience who's dealing with drugs. And I'm like, man, if I can speak to them, then that's what it's all about. It's not necessarily about getting into the next level and the next level and the next
Yeah.
level. It's about really helping people own who they want to be. And hopefully everybody out there,
You
because
know,
everybody's got a
you said
journey.
something powerful.
Go ahead.
Well, and you said something powerful there too that I think that is worth repeating, is that, I think the best speakers are those that aren't looking to reach millions, they're looking to reach the one, because that's where the change happens, is in that one. And it's sometimes easy to lose sight of that when you see all the big flash and everything, but that's where the real power is. And so as we wrap this conversation up, one question I always love to end these on is, I believe there's so many things we hold true to our hearts and are who we are and what we believe. And so if people are listening or watching today and they're only going to walk away with one thing, what is your one thing for them?
My one thing that I would want people to understand is don't ever be afraid to embrace who you really are
Mm.
and spend every day really just trying to be that best for yourself. And it doesn't have to be a big step every day. Maybe for someone who's on a weight loss journey like I was, maybe it's, eating one healthy meal that you wouldn't have had. Or, maybe it's reaching out and trying to network one time if you're trying to do a job. Or maybe if you're like, trying to get a spouse or dating, maybe it's like sending one text. And it may not always be perfect, but you are growing every time that you take that risk or you try something new. You're growing whether you know it or not. But I would definitely say don't wait and don't be afraid to embrace those dreams that you have.
I love it. Well, that was awesome and such a great way to end this conversation. Chris, I have been looking forward to chatting, and I'm so appreciative that you came today
Thank you
as
so
a
much.
guest on Tell Your Story.
All right. Thank you so much, Todd. I appreciate it.
And thank you, everybody, for listening or watching another episode. Remember, you can check out all the past episodes on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever you get your stuff, it's there. I hope today's conversation with Chris has encouraged you to get out there and tell your story, because every story matters.